Cheers. Welcome to Culture Night.
Where each week we drink fancy wine and watch movies that are in some way culturally significant. I'm Andrew.
And I'm Sarah, and we are back for season 5, episode 3. Mm-hmm. It's getting very tricky because we've done so many seasons, and they usually only go up to like 6 or 7.
And we went Back to the Future.
Yes, that also
Didn't quite go in our normal chronological order for those coming from last week's episode. We went 60s, 50s, and now going to the 70s this week.
Yeah, I'm more talking about like the season number and the episode number. Like we've done so many now that it's just getting a little tricky to remember what's what. But we are back, and like he said, we are back to the 70s this week. We are still in the middle of our RomCom season. We started in the 1960s with Breakfast at Tiffany's. And then we did some research in the week in between and realized that we should probably have started in the 50s. So we went back and did the 7-Year Itch with Marilyn Monroe.
And her, quote, iconic scene.
We will get into it momentarily and slept on it. And then this week we are back in the 1970s. So hold on tight and see what we're watching tonight. But to start with, what are we drinking tonight?
I hate how you teed me up for this because I don't know how to pronounce this thing. Dao.
Whenever I see it, when I saw it when we were in Paso Robles and when we did not go there, but when I see it in the grocery store, I always just call it Dao.
They don't really give any sort of a pronunciation guide on there. They do say it is made with care and precision. This wine showcases the depth and complexity and elegance that can be achieved in Paso Robles. So this is the Dao 2022 Cab Sav from Paso Robles, California.
And we will see if we can figure out the pronunciation by the after show. So if you're really curious, stick around. I will say pouring it was a lot more purple, like a purpley red than some of the other ones that we've had that have been more of like a red.
Yeah, getting a little cork smell in the nose. That's about it.
That's it. Very dry smelling.
Mm-hmm.
Not
too
super
fruity,
sweet.
Yeah, it's good to taste.
Very alcohol forward.
Strawberry.
Like strawberry fruit leather.
Yeah. I'm sure this part's fascinating for everyone listening.
I know.
Listening to us slurp. Yeah, not really getting too much from this one. I'm hoping that as it like airs out a little bit, it'll get open up a little bit more, give us more notes and everything.
Yeah, it almost has like a not carbonation, but like a little bit of a tingly feeling when I swallow it.
But also, like a Cab Sav, I usually don't think of being too complex or having too much to go with it. So far it's fairly smooth despite being alcohol forward, if that makes sense.
But I will say last week's I felt like was more complex than this, and that was also a Cab Sav. So stay tuned. We'll see how that opens up. But we are, and again, if you have been around with the Culture Night Pod for a while and you're like, where's Tobin James? We still love and are wine club members at Tobin James, but we really committed to the podcast with drinking their wine every week, and we had a big stash, and we've really eaten our way through that. And we were kind of in between shipments and just decided to lean into the RomCom theme and get, grocery store wine, watch these chick flick movies, and hopefully maybe you all can find these wines and enjoy them with us.
The kind of wine they're just cruising down the grocery store aisle. It's right around, mid-level, and you just grab it, throw it in the cart, go home and watch a cheesy RomCom.
Exactly.
So with that out of the way, we're going to skip behind the screens tonight because we have just been busy and haven't had time to really do any deep research or anything this week.
And just sci-fi, there was a lot of like technical stuff that we wanted to learn about with that season. And RomCom is there's nothing super fancy to a lot of these movies. So didn't feel like we really needed one every week this time.
So we'll see if we can come up with something for next week. But for now, let's move on to the Slept On It segment.
Yes. Last week we watched The 7-Year Itch with Marilyn Monroe. Does your rating change after sleeping on it? You rated it a 4.8 and I rated it a 4.1.
Honestly, if anything, I'd probably dock it down to like a 4.3. There's not really much rewatchability there, quotability, anything. Just kind of seemed like it was just a movie, slightly interesting for the time, has the Marilyn Monroe scene, but as we talked about or hinted at earlier, it's a pretty big letdown. So maybe 4.3. Yeah,
I feel like your 4.8 came from bouncing off of Breakfast at Tiffany's. That was like so hard to follow and so much going on. And this was just like, oh, I know what's going on. Like, it's kind of an interesting premise. It's not something that I've seen a lot in movies recently. Like, okay, watching this, that I think you're like, wow, that was a lot better than last week. So you went a little high.
It's an interesting concept, and that's about all I can really give it. Honestly, I'm shocked I didn't give it a 3.8 originally.
I know. I was shocked. I mean, rolled the playback. I was shocked you did 4.8 last week. I'm going to stick with my 4.1. It was good to see that iconic scene. It was also good to just see like a Marilyn Monroe movie at all, because I'd never seen one of her acting before. And again, just to like check in with the times, what's going on in the 50s. It was interesting.
Yeah. Maybe we'll see some more Marilyn Monroe movies later in later episodes or later podcast seasons, and we can see more of what her acting was like, or whether it was just she was just not, or she was. We'll see if she was actually just overrated.
Yeah,
after all.
Or just very one-dimensional. All right, so now with that, it's time for Fact Snacks.
All right.
I think this is quickly becoming our favorite segment. So starting with the iconic scene, we did do a little bit of research last week and kind of knew a little bit about it, the fact that they let that scene be open to the public when they were filming it, but I found a little bit more information about it. They filmed that scene at 1 a.m., and they had thousands of fans, like we said, looking on. The scene was filmed on the corner of Lexington Avenue and 52nd Street in New York City. And they had to do that scene 14. They did 14 takes. And then they still didn't even end up using that scene because of the crowd noise from the thousands of people that were there. So they ended up just reshooting it in California. So the one in the movie is not from that night.
That almost like makes it even worse. Like all the build up and everything, and it seems like it's more about the publicity of it, of the filming of it. It's not even the shot they used. I'm honestly surprised they didn't just have it on a soundstage to begin with, so they could control all those things.
Exactly. I did read somewhere that they might have used some of those original takes for like promotions for it. So I don't know whether that was like any kind of trailer they might have had out at the time or just like posters and stuff. But the actual scene is from California. And let's see, they had 14 takes while 100 male photographers and between 2,000 and 5,000 spectators who all loudly reacted whenever her skirt blew up looked on. Just wild. And I also read that might have been what led to her divorce from Joe DiMaggio, was that just like all of the commotion about her having this subway.
Not thrilled with it. You might have this in a fact snacker. We're planning on covering it, but I did hear that she put on like several layers of like underwear, so like even as her skirt blew up, it's not like anyone got a look at anything. And
I quote, my next note says she wore 2 pairs of white underwear during the scene so that no one would accidentally see too much.
Yeah, so
and she, I mean, like even in the movie you can see she's holding her hands down so the dress doesn't blow up too much. So I mean, she was trying to be modest about it, but
I wonder obviously there were a whole lot of spectators there, like what was the call that was put out? Was like, hey, come see Marilyn Monroe's dress as it blows. And like,
how do 2,000 people know about that in 1955? Like, there's no like tweet going out like, hey, let's go look at Marilyn Monroe's underwear.
Yeah. And I mean, I can see Joe DiMaggio being like mad at that. I mean, the movie part, it's not like you really even saw anything, but I feel like sitting there for hours while all these people are, oohing and awing over her and trying to get like a glimpse, I could see that being really annoying.
Definitely. My next note is the production code. I've also seen it mentioned as the Hays Code, but it was what predated the MPA ratings. It dictated that, quote, adultery must never be the subject of comedy or laughter. So that is why we mentioned last week that this is based off of a play, and in the play, Sherman, I believe, is the main character's name, the main guy's name. He sleeps with Marilyn Monroe's character, the girl. But because of that code that was in place at the time, adultery could not be the subject of comedy. So that's why they didn't have her sleeping with him. And I believe it's the director was quoted as saying that because of that, the movie was a, quote, nothing picture, and that he wished he'd waited until the 70s to make it because the MPA ratings came out in 1968.
Yeah, I get that. But I also feel like it made it more interesting with his like guilty conscience over not actually doing something versus it just being like, oh, his wife got out of town, he cheated on her, and then goes running after her. Yes,
I said last week, and I kind of still feel this way, that I was waiting for them to have sex the whole time. And I guess a lot of romance is fantasy as opposed to what you actually end up experiencing. But he was just so like torn up over how like obsessed with her he was, and then like for nothing to even come of it.
All those fantasies and dreams and everything like that. And I think that, to me at least, made it more interesting as opposed to it just being really predictable and just.
I wonder how that would have changed it.
Yeah.
So
it would be a different movie.
That's for sure. And then just two more snacks. The Bell Potato Chip Company was a it was a company that was based on the West Coast at the time. And they were trying to get more publicity. So they were sending cases of their goods to movie sets in the hopes that like someone would pick it up as a prop. And they eventually did choose this potato chip company, and that's like how they got on theirs, because they were just like trying to promote themselves. And unfortunately, the company went out of business in 1995, so you cannot eat Bell potato chips anymore with your champagne. But I did feel like we needed to talk about the potato chips a little bit since we were so obsessed with that idea last week. And then my last fact snack is that this movie was actually banned in Ireland because it was, quote, indecent and unfit for general exhibition.
Weird.
So
I don't think of that being too racy for Ireland.
Right.
But
I thought that was interesting. So apparently there's lots of controversy over this and all kinds of things. But and there was a lot. I mean, there was actually a lot more behind the scenes for this than I was expecting. But
speaking of the champagne with the potato chips, though, I don't know if we mentioned it on the podcast yet.
We did not mention it on the podcast. We posted about it on Instagram. Yeah. And if you haven't seen that, go check us out at Culture Night Pod. We did eat
more behind the scenes stuff for the podcast there.
Yes, we ate some champagne or ate potato chips and drank champagne, and you can see how we enjoyed the Marilyn Monroe combo.
So, moving on, do you have any final thoughts about the 7-Year Itch?
No, I'm glad we watched it. I think it would very much fit into what we're trying to do here. And
now whenever we see references to that, or we see like actual images or anything, like in a montage, something like that, we now know the whole story.
Yeah. And I feel like that's just what's so great about this whole podcast in general. There's been so many times where it's like one little thing in a commercial or one little thing that I saw on a poster in a store, and it's like, oh, I know where that's from now. And
some of them, they're not obvious that we notice. We're like, oh my God, we would never in a million years have realized that was reference to that, because it's so subtle. That's my favorite part about doing this podcast so far.
100%. All right. Are you ready to move on to tonight?
Yes. What are we watching tonight?
Tonight, we are watching Annie Hall from 1977.
It is rated PG, which, again, this probably predates a lot of the modern day rating system. So I'm assuming it's going to be possibly a little racier than a traditional today PG rating.
Yes, but it was almost 10 years after the ratings came out. So closer than the 7-Year Itch was to anything. But
surprisingly, some things the rating system has gotten much more conservative over the years, it feels like.
Yes. Just real quick side note. If you've ever seen the 1998 Parent Trap or whatever year it came out with Lindsay Lohan in it, our daughter was watching it today, and it's rated PG for like mild mischief. And I was like, mild mischief? Are you kidding me? That seems like such an interesting thing.
They do show a kid drinking wine.
I don't think that's her mischief, though.
I feel like that would be more called out, like in the pretext of the movie showing contains depictions of
alcohol.
Yeah,
but no, just mild mischief is why it's not rated G. Like parental guidance is suggested for it. So I don't know. All of these ratings are so interesting. So I think it's really fun that we pay attention to it every week.
That mischief managed.
100%. So are you ready to go back in the time machine?
Let's hop in the time machine. Welcome back to 1977. We've been here before. The top 3 movies released that year were Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, grossing $195 million. Number 2 was Close Encounters of the Third Kind, grossing $166 million. And the third was Saturday Night Fever, grossing $137 million. I believe at least Saturday Night Fever is on a list of eventual movies we want to cover in a season. Number 11 that year was this movie, Annie Hall, grossing only $38 million.
I do find it interesting because it has the release date on the website that I get these from. And Saturday Night Fever came out on December 16th, 1977. So is that like the total grossing amount?
It must not be within that
because
year.
Because sometimes it's like movies that came out the year before in December end up on that list. And just find it interesting how
it's that infamous Hollywood accounting where they're going to make the numbers make them look the best while paying out the least amount to
100%.
So someone must have had a reason to make it or show that total for their year. The top 3 songs released that year were Tonight's the Night, Gonna Be Alright by Rod Stewart, I Just Want to Be Your Everything by Andy Gibb, and Best of My Love by The Emotions. Definitely know the third one.
I know the first one too.
I might if I heard it.
I think you would know it. I do not know the second one off the top of my head, but
so not a list of bangers like some seasons or some years. So Annie Hall, have you seen it before?
I have not. Have you seen it before?
I know nothing about this movie.
I have heard of it because I feel like I've heard it like mentioned or referenced, whether it was in other movies or maybe in other things. I've definitely heard, like Annie Hall, or like quoted something like that in a show or a movie or something, but I can't place where it's from or what the reference is. So I know nothing about it.
I assumed it was just like the full name of the movie Annie or something until you mentioned it, like that it was this, and I was like, well, I don't think that's a RomComs. I don't think it's the same movie.
You would have been so disappointed. The Sun was not going to come out tomorrow.
It's going to be a hard knock life for me tonight because I know nothing about this movie.
Yes, I do know some of the actors that are in it, just based on me trying to do research to get this outline done. So I will not spoil them for you here, but.
So I want to make my prediction of what I think the movie is going to be about.
Yeah, going off of the really descriptive title of Annie Hall.
I think Annie Hall is going to be like a famous building. Judging by your reaction, I think I'm on the right track.
I mean, I don't know. I literally have no idea what the movie's about, but
could be like a school, maybe. Probably not a church. I feel like that maybe doesn't quite fit the name of a hall, but I think it's a famous building where maybe some people meet and fall in love, and there's some sort of maybe like a When Harry Met Sally type situation where they come back and revisit this place multiple times. It kind of follows the time over their relationship.
So you think their meet cute happens at Annie Hall? At
Annie Hall, and they want to go back. Like, hey, we got to go back to Annie Hall. Or maybe it's a pool hall. I don't know. We'll see.
Ooh, pool hall. That would be interesting.
Might be some trouble.
Right here in River City. Oh man, I don't even really have. I mean, your guess is fantastic. You're very creative. You should have been a writer. I love your idea, and I'm hoping that it's a building, but I think I'm probably going to go with the fact that that's a character name. And I think it's going to be just like Boy Meets Girl, problem happens.
Yeah, just seems like a very, uninteresting name for a movie, but we'll see.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking about this earlier today. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to make a prediction for this movie. And I have nothing. I have no idea what to even pull on. Because, I mean, some titles you can get some kind of idea from it. But Annie Hall, all you get's a name. So I'm hoping it's a building. Based off of your description, I'm going to just really hope that you're right. I'm going to
be pretty excited if it is.
Oh my God.
I think there's about a 0.7 chance it is.
I really love your percentages about how your predictions are going to go. It's fantastic.
Not confident, just real hopeful.
Oh man. So anyways, without further ado, let's figure out whether we're going to a building or meeting a person and drink some wine, and we will catch you back after Annie Hall.
Guys in Annie Hall. Cheers.
Cheers. Annie Hall.
That was a lot of words in the movie. Not what you said. There were a lot of words in that movie. Oh my God.
And it is debatably one of the shortest movies we've watched so far.
Yeah, it was very efficient.
Like one of the shortest movies, maybe next to like one or two of the film noir from like the 40s.
Yeah, the first film noir one we watched, the Murder or
Stranger on the Third Floor.
That was the shortest, but this was maybe the second shortest.
An hour and 33 minutes. It was not long.
Felt longer. So before we get too far into that, though, let's start with the wine scale. This season, we are not drinking Tobin James wines, so the wine scale is a bit more reflective of real life. Above a 5 generally means take it. Below 5 means leave it, and it's still pretty subjective. That being said, I'm going to give this wine a 4.4.
I'm going to give it a 3.3. I really did not care for it.
Yeah. So I will say my rating would be lower. My first glass was not as bad as my second one. The first one, it was fine. It was just kind of like a not remarkable wine, sitting there basically right at like the 5, just whatever. The second glass, it was like more carbonated. And
I mean, I said it tastes carbonated right off the bat. I knew it. I mean, obviously I know it's not a carbonated wine, but it has that like feel, mouth feel. That's a wine word. Yeah. And I did not care for it.
Yeah. Maybe you poured my glass first, and on the top it just wasn't as carbonated or something. I don't know.
I know. I was trying to remember. I was like, which one did I pour first?
The second glass was markedly worse.
Yeah. I didn't really enjoy either one very much. The first couple sips were okay. I did get a lot of that like strawberry fruit leather, like kind of not like sweet flavor, but just like that strawberry flavor, which was kind of enjoyable. But nah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Wouldn't grab this one if I was walking on the island and be like, oh, I've had this before. It was good. It was It's one where I'm be like, I've had this before. I'm gonna pass. No
I'm
offense.
Dao.
Dao.
So oops.
Deo.
We did not look up the pronunciation of it.
Well, it's not worth it at this point.
Although I have heard the views from this vineyard in Paso Robles are incredible because we were told go there for the views.
Yeah.
Maybe not so much the wine. I don't remember the specifics of the conversation, but I think it was
right.
more that it was like in Paso when we went, you didn't have to pay for tastings anywhere. It was pretty like you come and taste our wines and then like we hope you buy some. And I think this might have been one of the ones that like you had to pay to taste. It was like they have a little bit more attitude. Mm-hmm. I don't know. But anyways.
Yeah, I do remember that. And I think it was one more where it's like, you're not going there for the wines.
Yeah. And we didn't go there for the wine. So here we are now. Anyways, moving on to the movie rating out of 10.
I'll let you go first.
Oh no.
Unless you really want me to go first.
We'll give this one a 3.7.
I'm giving it a 1.8.
Oh, I think this might be the first one.
So, full disclosure, while we watched this movie, I ate a Dove chocolate, and on the wrapper, it said, "Embrace optimism." I was planning to rate this a 1.7, but with that in mind, I gave it a 1.8.
Oh my God.
I did not enjoy this movie.
I'm still just like trying to figure out how I feel about it. It gave me a lot of Breakfast at Tiffany's vibes because it was just hard. There was a lot going on, but like not a lot going on. And I appreciate that it was trying to be something different, like the storytelling. Like I appreciate that they were trying something different. It's not like, oh, we're just going to tell the same, like boy and girl fall in love. And like they go on this cutesy little journey. They have a problem. They get back together, blah, blah, blah. Like I appreciate that it was not like stereotypical of a lot of those things. But I still was just like, I don't really know what's going on. And obviously Woody Allen has all kinds of...
Yeah, he's done a lot of things.
All kinds of things. Which I was kind of skewing my like... Because his character's creepy.
Yeah.
Like real creepy. And Diane Keaton, like... all I could think about was like, Father of the Bride, Family Stone. Like I just like I heard her voice, but she didn't match.
She seems like the same person in like everything that she does, or the 100%. Same kind of vibe.
Just that like quirky, eccentric.
Yeah, wants to be a stoner vibe. I don't know. It's like,
oh my God, yes.
It's weird. Before we get too far into that though, let's do the movie description. Yes. I will start. Angry Jewish New Yorker guy has a bunch of odd relationships, including one with Annie Hall, and is very angry about literally everything.
That's almost as succinct as the one from the TV, which I've already read. This is the first time I've ever read it before I read it on TV because it was so... let me just... I'm sorry. Let me just read it. I'm sorry, I was not prepared. New York comedian Alvy Sinker falls in love with the ditzy Annie Hall.
I feel like it's still kind of misleading.
Yep.
On that.
This is from the same like TV screen that has given us the like extreme adjective descriptions and stuff, and this is like a single sentence with no descriptors.
So did they give descriptors for either of them? Ditzy Annie Hall.
Yes, they did. New York comedian and ditzy.
It's like more of like a full title for him versus a description. Hers is more of a description. Ditzy. Some of the descriptions it's like multiple pages. Yeah. I will say this one, I'm mad because when I clicked on the movie, before I clicked play, I saw those like five.
Yeah, literal like 6 words.
And it was like, well, crap, it's not a place.
I know.
Very disappointing. They did find it out. They did reveal that in the first like minute of so.
He was extra fussy still when they revealed that her name was Annie.
Being right.
You're like 0 for 3 so far this year.
Scared money don't make money. Was the movie what you expected? Clearly not. On my part.
Kind of. I mean, I didn't know too much what it was about. I was like, boy meets girl, fall in love.
I expected this to be closer to what Breakfast at Tiffany's was. Whereas more like about the person and her like big, bold personality. And this, it was more about his big obnoxious personality than anything, and she was just kind of like a collateral damage, almost like just a casual, like just there.
Yes, it did give me a little bit of When Harry Met Sally vibes of. I mean, yes, they're both set in New York, but I think Meg Ryan and Diane Keaton's characters are very similar in their just how they live life, and Woody Allen and what's his name?
Diane Keaton?
No,
Tom Hanks? No, Billy
Crystal? Yeah, Billy Crystal. Like,
sorry, Tom Hanks was in a lot of movies we watched earlier.
Yeah,
I know that he is not in it. It was a good default answer.
Sleepless in Seattle also, same vibe. There's another one with the two of them. You've Got Mail, Meg Ryan. Okay. Anyways, back on to all the rom-coms we've watched. Billy Crystal and Woody Allen, I feel like they kind of still had similar vibes of like how they carried themselves and like the kind of character that they were, that like I was just getting such a strong When Harry Met Sally vibe.
Also the very beginning.
But I liked When Harry Met Sally got like so much more, but I don't love that movie. I've only seen it twice, but
also the intro to both movies. And When Harry Met Sally, they start out with like these older couples like talking about whatever, and that's when it starts with Woody Allen like looking, like breaking the fourth wall. Right. It's he's being interviewed for like just rants for 3 or 4 minutes. So I had a note of that at first, and I did kind of see somewhat similarities there. This preceded When Harry Met Sally, though.
Yeah. Next.
Moving on to the next question. How well did it age / could this movie be made today? I thought it aged fine. I don't really think there's anything that could have been made today. It seemed fairly timeless, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, there were certain things where I was like, okay, this seems very 70s, but nothing like super.
It's more just like how they looked, like the hairstyle, the dressing, and everything. Everything else seemed like the way they talked and interacted. A lot of things seemed fairly progressive. Yeah.
It was more just like the words like analyst as opposed to therapist and grass instead of pot or marijuana. Like those little things where it was like, okay, this feels like very 70s.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. But overall, for the most part, didn't seem like there was anything fundamentally not makeable.
I think it could still be made today.
Aged fine. Did they say the title of the movie in the movie? Yes. Because it was her name, and they said it a couple times.
Yes. We need to see how many movies we've watched that are just like the name of a character. Because I feel like there's a couple.
I wonder if there's also any that we watched where there's the name of a character they didn't say the character's name in it. That would be impressive.
That would.
Does the title fit the movie? I think not, because it was more about him than her.
But he is such a like obsessive person that it's like he is obsessed with her. I mean, I do think there could be a better title for this for sure, but
just like unhappy,
discontent.
Yeah, just deeper issues.
Or disgruntled.
Yeah, fussy.
Please, can we lobby for a rebrand of this 1977 classic and just call it?
Yeah, Annie Hall, like she's just taking strays out here. She's not at all the problem. This guy's just fussy. So let's just give it the title it deserves. Fussy.
Yeah, I love it. I'm so here for it. I support it. This is like, okay, you had such good like new movie titles for so many, but I feel like, I mean, sci-fi, they did a really good job of naming movies, but I feel like you're back. That's
you got them. Were there any actors that went on to do bigger things?
Jeff Goldblum. This has to be one of the first things he was in, right?
Yeah, he's such like a small character. It'd be weird for him to be that small of a cameo. Beverly D'Angelo, who was the mom in Christmas Vacation. I think this was her first role, like TV or movie. From
really?
A quick like 20-second before this movie to figure out what the hell her name was. Because I assume her name is not the mom from Christmas Vacation. That it was the top of the list of her filmography, and it seemed like she hadn't done any TV stuff until the 80s. So her role was like person in background of TV show.
Yep. But we both instantly were like, oh my God, it's Ellen.
Shelley Duvall. This was her. She was before The Shining, and she did The Shining like 3 years later. That was her next movie after this, but she went on to do bigger things in that.
Where does this fall in Christopher Walken's?
That I did not get to. So Christopher Walken was in it. I feel like he seemed relatively young.
I couldn't look away from the TV for the 4 seconds he was on the screen because I was just like, I believe it because it's him for sure, without a doubt. Like Christopher Walken there's no mistaking.
He still talked like Christopher Walken, but it wasn't the way over exaggerated Christopher Walken.
Yeah, but it was without a doubt him, and I needed to just process more.
I feel like I need to see movies of him before he became like the meme a version of himself, because I think nowadays whenever he plays anything in a movie, he's playing Christopher Walken in that.
Playing Christopher Walken, playing whatever the character is.
It's like several layers of Christopher Walken deep that he's playing, and is going like so into it that to see this where it clearly was before all that was interesting. But it's still talked like him.
We need to figure out like where this was.
Do we need to do a Christopher Walken season?
No. Oh my God, we would die. No, I mean, we don't have a high audience now, but that would just really kill it.
Jump the shark at that point.
What impact do you think this movie had on pop culture? I mean, I had heard of it. Mm-hmm. I do think this was probably also relatively early in Diane Keaton's career too, or like something that really pushed her on the map. I do know that she won a couple of like Golden Globe or Academy Award. I mean, whatever. I don't know a whole lot about which ones are the highest, but she won some of the big awards for this.
Woody Allen,
I'm not sure.
Wrote, directed, produced,
and he was really well. Like this was apparently his most like critically acclaimed.
I don't know if this was like if he did much before it, or if this was one of his like passion projects that he like put it all together and did all those things because no one else would pick it up, and it like launched things he did where it really fell in his career. But like for pop culture, I think we obviously saw some influences of this for When Harry Met Sally. I know you haven't seen Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind with Drew
Barrymore?
Jim Carrey. I almost said Drew Carey, and it's a very different person. It's closer to Mariah Carey than Jim Carey. With Jim Carrey, if this felt very similar to that in a lot of ways, I imagine it probably influenced a lot of like some of the New York, like really fast-paced talking, moody type movies similar to When Harry Met Sally.
It felt very like indie movie. I feel like this has to predate indie movies.
Yeah,
it seems like more of a recent thing, like not a big blockbuster.
For sure, but I still feel like it just really influenced, a lot of those style of movies that we've kind of seen, and just become kind of like this felt like it was derivative of those, but I think it predated them. So I think that's kind of where I see the pop culture impact.
Yeah, and one day I'm gonna figure out where I've seen this movie quoted. And I'm going to like, my whole life is going to just like feel complete because this has been on our list to watch for this season for a couple weeks now. And I've been just racking my brain and I still cannot figure out where this came from. So
I hope you get that connection.
I hope so.
Do you feel cultured after watching it? Slightly.
Yeah. I think this might be another one of those, like, I'll realize it later kind of things. I mean, like I said, I have heard of it before, so I'm glad I have seen it and know what it is now. It's not like, Star Wars or Back to the Future where like there like really are these huge like cultural phenomenons that are still everlasting, even 30, 40, 50, 60, however many years later. But right now I'm just kind of in a like, sure. Yeah.
When I mentioned to my mom earlier that this is what we were watching tonight for the podcast, her response was, never really was a Woody Allen person. And you know what? I don't think I am either.
Yeah. It was kind of, I mean, I don't remember all the specifics of what has happened or has come out since this about his poor choices, but it was clouding my judgment a lot.
Yeah.
But
I can see where these were
red flags that we should all have been like,
for sure. Yep.
And I feel like I still would have picked up on a lot of those things, even if he hadn't, if we didn't know all of that. Like it was definitely like, oh, this doesn't seem right.
For sure. So we'll move into notes.
I think it's my turn to go first.
Your turn? Okay.
I don't have a ton of notes, but my first note is some OCD or something like thank God he was in therapy. I very progressive.
Seeing an analyst, you mean?
I'm sorry. He's
this is his problem.
He's in analysis.
You're seeing an analyst and
he was seeing
not
a therapist.
There's his problem.
And he's been seeing him for what, 16 years or 15 years? 16?
Probably like 30 at that point.
It was definitely mentioned many times about the exact number, but even before he said something about going to therapy, I was like, you've got some OCD. And like, that is absolutely fine. but I think you need some strategies in your life to kind of navigate these things,
Right.
just like the waiting in line and the nervous tension about so many things and just being angry about so much stuff, like the hyperfixation on so many things. Just definitely someone that needs a little bit more support. But I also feel like
Didn't seem like you really grew up in a household that was giving or able to give that support. So
100%. But it also is just interesting to me of like how prevalent was the talk of things like OCD or ADD or ADHD, or, you know, like when did that really come about, and when was that something we were diagnosing and like trying to support people with, and just trying to figure out where that fit in the society.
They try to diagnose it or treat it with just more medication as opposed to understanding
Probably. And my next note is her quote of, let me get my camera, and just like how like such an old tech thing that is, I mean, all of us are just like, oh, like, let me just pull up my phone when the lobsters are all over the floor. But I appreciated that it was like, oh, this is something that I'm going to want to remember. Like, let me document it, but hang on, I got to go get the camera. We're going to let the lobsters crawl over the floor.
Oh, the same thing. They were like making a core memory right there. And nowadays it would have been like a reel or an Instagram story or a TikTok or something.
Oh my God, guys, we were making lobsters and they're all over the floor.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it would have been a very like selfie style. It would definitely be like a story for sure. So I just thought it was interesting to have to like go and get the camera. And then she's like still asking him to pose with like while she's clicking and winding the film. Loved it. My next note is quietest nightclub ever. Like, she's like, oh, I'm going to be singing in a nightclub. And he was like, oh, you're going to love nightclubs, blah, blah, blah. And so I'm expecting like The Matrix, where they're supposedly having a conversation that no one in their right mind would ever be able to hear. And she is just singing, and it's silent.
Is that like more like I want to say a gentleman's club, but that'd be more like a strip club. It just seemed more of like a high class lounge that you have to go to.
I was like a poetry lounge or something, where people are just going to sit and like snap quiet when you're done. But it was, we've seen several nightclub scenes in our Culture Night deep dives. And this was definitely the quietest one for sure. My next note is that it's an interesting method of storytelling, which I've kind of touched on already. It was interesting in that it was trying to break the mold of what a stereotypical watching a movie. We're going to just watch these people, but like breaking that fourth wall, talking to the camera, starting with the interview, having background people put their input in, even the subtitles where, you know, they're saying stuff, but it was like what they were really thinking underneath, which I feel like is really interesting. And like, you know, we're all talking, like when you watch movies like this, you're like, oh, well, obviously she thinks he's being really stupid here. Or like,
yeah, there was a lot of like really cool storytelling. I just feel like it wasn't a great story for some reason, and maybe it's because I've seen other things that have built on this and told the story better. Like it was hard to follow in some points because the timeline wasn't linear.
yes,
Kind of kept going back and forth. But I do agree. Like I loved the breaking of the fourth wall, and then like you said, like the other characters also breaking the fourth wall with them in that, and all those cool things. It's just I just wanted it to be better than what it was.
I wanted it to be very different.
Yeah.
I mean, and so that's why I gave it the score that I did of that like 3 something, because I was interested in how they were telling the story. And I feel like, especially being here for this Culture Night pod of how do we tell movies? How does this stuff get made? How does all of this stuff happen? I find that so interesting. And it's such a good breakup of how so many of the stories we've been watching have been told. But like you said, it's just not a great story.
Yeah. It's like so many of the pieces were there, just not like the main course wasn't there. And
I also like going back to what I mentioned in the first episode of this season of the elements of a rom-com, which we haven't really revisited, but I'm pretty sure the first one was like 2 lovable leads. And I didn't really love either of these characters. And I think that was like the biggest knock on the movie is like, I could see liking Diane Keaton's character, I guess Annie Hall. I was like, what's her name? Yeah,
there it is.
I love the movie. With somebody different that was like more supportive of her like quirkiness or like more like neutral, but he was so neurotic and she was so just like, oh, I'm happy to be here, and that it just I disliked both of them more because they were together.
Yeah, I really dislike Diane Keaton, and I think that, you know, someone like just different and more likable would have just been better. Like she's so off-putting to me. I know a lot of people love Meryl Streep same way, just do not like that actress. I don't know, maybe if someone like I said, more like Breakfast at Tiffany's, so someone more like a Audrey Hepburn that seemed more like believably naive and young and all that, would have been more believable in that role and more.
But I feel like
likable.
she's always like that. That I just because that's how I know her. I feel like that's why I just like assume that that's just how she is. Just kind of very.
That I wanted someone different, and he's meant to be like the worst. Like, I don't know if it's him playing himself or he's trying to play a stereotypical version of, or a more exaggerated version of himself. But yeah, definitely not two likable leads there.
Yeah, that was a big knock for me. But also, back to Diane Keaton for just a second. There, she was telling a story when she was pouring the wine when she invited him up to her apartment, and you said you like got bored during her story and whatever. When she was telling that story, I wasn't even really listening to what she was saying, but like the way she was telling that story was like how our 4-year-old child tells us a story. Just like very dramatic, but like kind of then stops and like laughs at herself a little bit when she's like still telling the story, and then kind of gets lost on a tangent a little bit. And just like, I was like, oh my God, I feel like I'm watching my toddler tell a story, but this is like a grown adult woman.
There were some times where I felt like she was doing a pretty good job of the acting though, and just trying to kind of be loose. It almost seemed like they were improving at some points in it though, the way they were talking. Other times it felt like she was reading off a script, and I could tell that she was like
trying to hit her mark of.
Right, she was doing the motions before she had fully delivered the line. Like you could tell she was like setting herself up for it. Like she knew what line was she needed to work towards, and that was kind of like jarring to me. And I know like early on in her career, whatever, and it was see like somewhat of an indie film budget, given that he like did everything on it. I won't knock it too hard on that, but it felt like there were some times where I was like, oh man, she's like doing a great job, and other times where I was like.
I appreciate what you're saying. I know I can't pinpoint specific scenes, but I know what you're talking about for sure. All right. And then my last note is the artist guy that she meets after she sings at the nightclub and then sees again out in LA. He has a haircut like Lord Farquaad from Shrek.
Oh my God. Yes. I was like, did someone like choose to have that haircut? Does that actor have that haircut and he just was in this, or did they cast him and they were like, okay, but you gotta have like the worst haircut?
I took a picture on the screen because I was so afraid that you weren't going to have like paid attention to it, because I feel like there's so many times where I like notice things and you're like, oh man, I didn't see that. But I was like, I have to get a picture of this guy just in case you didn't notice it, because I was like, Lord Farquaad, like that's all I've got going.
No, I was like, he's short, he's annoying, terrible haircut. I just couldn't.
The weird bangs.
And like every time I like saw him on the screen, it's like those alarms are going off of like, I just like could not unsee all of that.
Yeah. So that's how I wrap up my notes, is with Lord Farquaad.
What a way to go out.
Right. All right, your turn.
I touched on the intro reminding me of When Harry Met Sally. My next note was that this guy is Larry David. The way that he is just the way Larry David plays himself in Curb Your Enthusiasm, where he's just mad about everything and over the top, cannot let things go, just is so overly anal and like will not, let anything slide, just constantly talking and ranting and just upsetting people. It just feels like Larry David I could see being very inspired by this particular character, if that is not how Woody Allen normally is. I assume he probably is.
Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about Larry David, but what I do know, I feel like at least in how he like talks and carries himself, I can see a lot of what you're talking about for sure.
You can just say my word for it. I'm pretty right. My next note was that this reminds me of Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. My next note was that this is certainly not today's PG.
Yes. And it's not that it was like egregiously in like really dirty language or like really sexual stuff, but I was like, this would just like be a very easy PG-13.
But I think even if there wasn't a PG-13 at the time, I think this would be clearly more on the side of R than
I think when
PG.
these guidelines came out, like PG just was PG-13, like parental guidance. Like you need to see this with your parents.
Yeah, your parents can choose when you see it.
Yeah. And then we kind of have stretched those lines a little bit.
Yeah. Now we've taken the choice out of the parents, and we've just said, if you're a teenager, you're probably okay. Otherwise, you need to be 17. Yeah. I just think there was so much with all like the drugs and smoking and the sex and the nightclubs and
Woody Allen just like talking about sex literally nonstop.
Yeah. That it did not come close to what we view as PG nowadays. And I can kind of see why they created the PG-13 and the G to kind of fill in some of those gaps of like, you can't just have PG and R.
I think it's been so interesting because I'm so glad we did the MPAA ratings deep dive so early, because I mean, like as long as we've known it, there's G, PG, PG-13, R, like that all makes sense. But to see like these early films that are rated something and would be something totally different now, and like, oh, that's why we kind of added PG-13 and that's why we changed it like this. Like, and it just seems to make so much more sense now to see that evolution has been really cool.
Yeah. Every time I think of the rating system though, I think of the NC-17 one. And I remember like hearing about that rating, like growing up, and I was like, man, they must be wild in North Carolina if there's like this whole rating just for them. And then I also thought it was weird. I was like,
I love you so much.
But I was like, but R, like, don't you have to be like 18 to like watch that? So why is there this other one that's like really wild that's 17? Like, what?
But only for people in North Carolina,
right? What is it about North Carolina where it's like, okay, if you're in North Carolina and you're 17, you can see this stuff and it's dark, or if you're 18, you can see these R-rated movies. I mean, that's just how my mind worked. So
no, but like, I love you because you're like, oh, I'm always right. I'm always right. But then you say things like that, and I'm like, oh, you sweet little baby child.
I make a lot of assumptions and guesses, and over time, I've trained those to be more accurate. I batted a lot of zeros when I was younger.
I really wish that I was friends with you as a child. Like, that's one of my biggest life regrets.
Yeah, I could go on and on about some of the misses there, but you learn from your mistakes sometimes.
Stay tuned. I'm sure he'll share more.
My next note was that I hate Diane Keaton. I do not like her character. I do not think she's a great actress. I think it's one thing where it's like, oh, half the time I think she's okay, half the time I think she's terrible. I think just means you're a bad actress, because like it's like flip of a coin there. You need to be mostly good and have a couple of lapses. And for everything I've seen of her like acting career, it seems like sometimes she's just kind of like, I'm just gonna like laugh and like make a scrunchy face, and that's gonna be my acting, and I'm gonna be kind of odd.
I don't know. I've always loved her character in Father of the Bride, and I even really like her character in Family Stone. Those are the two big ones. I've seen her in other things, but like those are the two ones that come to the top of my head. But I think because I've seen both of those so many times, it's all I could think about seeing her in this, and like knowing that she evolves to that. Not that it's she's relatively same character, but like I think she's a better actress.
I mean, like
now
she could. So I agree, but I wonder if some of those are situations where like you like it because of the script and everyone else around it like made the whole movie itself was good and she happened to be in it.
They're two pretty solid movies.
But like, I will agree with you. Like, it could be worse. Like, if what's her face that I hate,
Meryl Streep.
No, the other one that's in like Elf and others.
Mary Steinberg.
Yeah, Mary Steinberg could be her.
She is like your number one hatred.
Absolute bottom.
And then it's Meryl Streep. And it's just, I don't think I knew that Diane Keaton was not on your.
Meryl Streep's below Diane Keaton.
So Diane Keaton's worse.
No, so it goes what? Diane Keaton, Meryl Streep,
Mary Steinberg, whatever her name is.
If Mary Steinberg, whatever, had been in Family Stone, I could see her like trying to be that same type of person and just me not being able to watch that movie.
I'm glad that she's not in it because I do really like that movie.
Anyways, enough about
Steinbergen, Mary Steinbergen.
Even worse. My next note was, were therapists like called analysts?
Right. It took me a second on that.
Like, I know that
I have heard it before though. Now that I hear it, it sounds right. But
I'm like, is that something we just stopped calling them that in like the 80s or 90s?
But I also feel like it's like of the last like 5-10 years, everyone's like, oh, but I go to therapy. It's so healthy. But like we've seen many movies where they're like, oh, my therapist, blah, blah, my analyst, blah, blah, blah. Like we've seen a lot more reference to these types of things where I'm like, oh, they're so progressive. But like, or are we just like thinking we're cool now and it's been cool for a while?
Hi, BetterHelp. If you would like to sponsor our podcast, we've got quite the opportunity cut out in some episodes like this where like maybe there's some money.
BetterHelp.
Anyways, I mean, I know people call them all sorts of things, shrinks and whatnot, that maybe that was just more prevalent and now therapist has kind of won out.
Yeah. I mean, it was definitely like maybe frowned upon a little bit in how they were describing it. Like it was a lot more of a negative connotation to start with. But the fact that it was such a major plot point of like, we go to therapy, I pay for her to go to therapy. Like we're doing this, like, that's better exposure than nothing.
Right. For the 70s, I feel like it just was.
Especially for
fragile.
how neurotic he was. Like that man needed to be in therapy for sure.
Yeah. I think if he wasn't in therapy, he just would not have been able to function. My next note was that it just seemed like endless dialogue. It was impressive.
It was like Gilmore Girls.
Yes. Like the script must have just been 1,000 pages. It was there were a couple points where it was very jarring that there just wasn't any talking.
And maybe that's why the nightclub felt so jarring, because it was like silent for a second before she started singing, and I bet that was why.
I started paying attention early on that it was just nonstop. Like the other person would start talking and they would launch into it. And as soon as there was any break, it'd cut to the next scene and someone's immediately talking. That I wonder if it was more to like kind of show like his inner thoughts, where it's just a million miles a minute.
Probably.
Just always thoughts going through his mind. Must have been. Next note was the Christopher Walken, Shelley Duvall, Beverly D'Angelo, Jeff Goldblum. And my last note was that this wants to make a case for being a Christmas movie in that they had Christmas
I almost
trees,
made a
there
note
was
of that
some
too.
Christmas songs. I'm not going to put this on the list for Christmas
He
movies.
instantly was like, do not add this to our Christmas movie list.
Like I wanted to make notes in some of these movies that we've watched for Culture Night and say like, oh, like let's see how many of these are Christmas movies. There were some Christmas scenes, Christmas music, Christmas trees. I'm not putting it on our list.
But hey, there have been some movies where there has been one single Christmas scene, or like not even a Christmas scene. There is a Christmas tree in the background and it's slightly alluded to the fact that it's Christmas for one less than a minute. And you're like, oh, Christmas movie, let's add it. And this one was like, hard no.
Well, yeah, because in some of them I'm like, well, we see so many movies in Christmas time, like over and over again, the same ones. I just want like a little bit of a break that if I could make a stretch to be like a movie we kind of liked, what about Breakfast at Tiffany's? That if there's a Christmas movie there that we can kind of, give a little change up there, I'd like to add it to the list of like, hey, not quite a traditional Christmas movie, but we'll go ahead and watch it. This one is not going to make the list of that.
And I appreciate that. Yeah. But like you said, like it was only an hour and a half, but it felt like it was so long. I was like, I need a break. And most of the time we stop halfway through our movies and we make popcorn and like have a snack and talk for a minute. And I almost like, we didn't do that tonight. And I was almost like, can we just like pause it for 5 minutes?
There's just so many words in this.
Take a break for a little bit and then go back to it. Cause it was just a lot.
Yeah. Part of me wanted to, but also part of me just wanted to get it over with. This was not.
As soon as it ended, he goes, thank God.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was not
it was
at all.
also jarring how the credits, there was no sound.
Yes.
That
was very alarming
credits.
too. I thought the same thing. And I guess because there's
sound.
typically music, so you see the scrolling credits, you expect the music. But I think too, it was the jarring of like, we're just not going to shut up for an hour and a half and then we're just going to be done.
And I'm questioning whether there was even a soundtrack in this one.
I am also now questioning.
Was it just
that too.
city music, city sounds?
There was definitely, I noticed a lot of the background, like ambiance, like ambient noise.
Yeah, I was gonna say I wouldn't go ambiance. There's ambient noise because there's some of it was just like
that's the word I was
horns
looking
and
for.
noise and chatter and all that.
And there was things where I was like, they had to have like ADR'd that. Like, there's no way that that's like the actual audio track. But there's so much background noise still that I'm like, and we couldn't have like dialed that back just like a little bit.
I think some of them they just filmed it like literally on the streets and just let all the background noise be in there to make it seem more different. I guess I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. But I mean, the more I think about it, this is a weird movie.
Yeah.
I am very interested. Stay tuned for next week where we will figure out why it won a bunch of Academy Awards and all the things, because it like swept the categories for a couple of the things from the brief thing. And I was showing him, I was reading the Wikipedia article or like glancing at it, the reception section of it for like how it was received by audiences was probably like 2 full like typed Word document pages of text just on Wikipedia. I mean, I was scrolling and I was like, I just want like a 1 sentence blurb to summarize this so I know what I'm going into like to talk about.
It looked like Woody Allen had written the critical response himself based on the amount of dialogue that he shoved into this. It was a lot.
Yeah. So anyways, if you are interested to see what kind of fun behind the scenes facts we learn about this movie, or I'm sorry, fact snacks, then stay tuned for next week where we will revisit and sleep on this movie and share all of our thoughts and behind the scenes information that we find in our research. If you are enjoying the podcast and if you are, I'm so tired.
If you like what we're about, you should follow us on Instagram and YouTube. And I think that's all we have.
Like, subscribe, rate, review.
Yeah.
If you have any questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, emails at
Objections, I don't know.
culturenightpod@gmail.com.
Grievances.
Send us some DMs. If you love this movie and you think that we're nuts, please feel free to send us a message.
Shred us. Like
tell us why you love this movie and why it's so fantastic. We would love to know, because
if you're Woody Allen, send us your thoughts on a whole bunch of tweets, like a whole big thread. Like
but send them in like tweet form, cap them at 140 characters. Yeah. Don't just send me paragraphs.
Yeah, we do have a Twitter account. We don't use it that much, but if you're Woody Allen, like I would love like a 700 thread or post thread about how he got this totally wrong.
Yeah. And if you're not Woody Allen, awesome.
Maybe it's an analyst.
We hope you come back next week, and cheers.
Cheers. Empty glass, go.